The tears streamed down Olivia Lambert's face as the stagecoach bounced mercilessly along the rutted trail, each jolt sending sharp pains through her swollen belly. It was the summer of 1873, and the unforgiving New Mexico Territory sun beat down on the wooden coach, turning it into an oven that suffocated its passengers with dusty heat. At 7 months pregnant and traveling alone, Olivia had nowhere to hide her discomfort or her grief. "For heaven's sake, woman, contain yourself." The stern-faced woman sitting across from her adjusted her hat pins with gloved fingers. "A lady does not make such displays in public." Olivia tried to stifle her sobs, pressing her handkerchief against her mouth. The pain in her lower back had been growing steadily worse since they'd left Santa Fe that morning, and the whispers about her condition unmarried and with child had followed her from town to town. "Shameful," muttered the businessman beside the stern woman, barely looking up from his ledger. Young women these days have no sense of propriety or consequence. The stagecoach lurched to a stop, throwing Olivia forward. She caught herself against the opposite seat, earning a scowl from the woman whose skirts she had nearly touched. "Whitewater Station," called the driver from above. 30-minute stop for fresh horses and refreshments. The other passengers filed out quickly, eager to escape both the heat and Olivia's company. She remained seated, trying to gather her strength when the door swung open again. A tall figure blocked the sunlight and a deep voice spoke. "Madam." "Are you all right in there?" Olivia looked up through tear-blurred eyes at a man silhouetted against the bright sky. He wore a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, and as he leaned in, she could make out sun-weathered features, kind eyes, and a concerned expression. "I'm fine," she whispered, though another tear betrayed her words. The man climbed into the coach and sat across from her, removing his hat. His light brown hair was damp with sweat, and he had a day's worth of stubble on his strong jaw. He reached into his pocket and offered her a clean bandana. "No, madam, you don't look fine at all." His voice was gentle, tinged with a southern drawl. "Name's Lucas Daniels. I run the livery here at Whitewater." Olivia hesitated before taking the bandana. "Olivia Lambert," she replied softly. "Heard what those folks were saying to you," Lucas said, his eyes flicking briefly to her rounded belly. "Ain't their place to judge, Miss Lambert." She wiped her eyes, embarrassed. "They're not wrong about my situation." Lucas leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "We all carry burdens in this life, Miss Lambert. Some are just more visible than others." He reached out slowly and with a gentleness that surprised her, wiped away a tear she'd missed on her cheek. "If you need to cry, then cry with me. I'll sit right here with you." Something in his words, the simple permission to feel her pain without shame, broke the dam inside her. Fresh tears flowed, and Olivia covered her face with both hands. "My husband." She started, then corrected herself. "My fiancé was killed 3 months ago, mining accident in Colorado. I'm traveling to my aunt in Arizona Territory. She's the only family I have left who will take me in." Lucas didn't recoil or judge. He simply sat with her, a steady presence as she sobbed. When her tears finally slowed, he spoke again. "The stage won't leave for another 20 minutes. Would you allow me to bring you some water and something to eat? You need to keep up your strength." Olivia nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Mr. Daniels." "Lucas," he corrected with a small smile, "we don't stand much on formality out here." As he stepped down from the coach, Olivia noticed the holstered revolver at his hip and the way he carried himself alert and cautious, scanning the station before walking toward the small building that served as both tavern and general store. He returned moments later with a tin cup of cool water, a plate with bread, cheese, and dried apple slices, and to her surprise, a small bundle of wildflowers. "The flowers grow behind the blacksmith shop," he explained, handing them to her. "Thought they might cheer you some." "That's very kind," Olivia said, genuinely touched by the gesture. No one had shown her such consideration since Daniel's death. Lucas sat with her as she ate, telling her about Whitewater, a growing settlement at the crossroads of 2 major trails. He'd come west from Georgia after the war, like many men looking for a fresh start, and had built the livery from nothing 5 years ago. "I know what it's like to start over," he said. "This country's hard, but it gives second chances to those willing to work for them." All too soon, the driver called for passengers to board. Olivia felt a strange reluctance to continue her journey. "Thank you for your kindness, Lucas," she said. "I won't forget it." Lucas stood and replaced his hat. "Where exactly in Arizona are you headed?" "Tucson." "My aunt has a boarding house there." A shadow passed over his face. "That's a rough journey for a woman in your condition. The next stretch has been seeing Comanche raids. The army's supposed to patrol, but—" He hesitated. "Just be careful, Miss Lambert." As the other passengers began to return, Lucas stepped down from the coach. Just before the driver closed the door, he looked at Olivia one last time. "Godspeed, Miss Lambert," he said softly. The stage pulled away from Whitewater Station, and Olivia watched through the small window as Lucas Daniels grew smaller in the distance, still standing in the yard, his hat in his hands. She pressed the wildflowers to her nose, breathing in their subtle fragrance, and for the first time in months, felt something besides grief in her heart. Night had fallen by the time the stagecoach reached Somerville, the next stop on the route to Tucson. The small settlement consisted of little more than a few buildings clustered around a well, but it offered a place to rest for the night before continuing the journey at dawn. Olivia struggled to descend from the coach, her back aching fiercely. The other passengers had already disappeared into the small inn, leaving her alone in the darkness. As she reached for her carpetbag, a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen, causing her to gasp and clutch the coach door. "Miss, you all right?" The driver peered down at her from his perch. "Yes," she managed. "Just tired." She made her way slowly to the inn, where the proprietor, a thin woman with suspicious eyes, looked her up and down before reluctantly offering her a small room at the back of the building. "We don't usually take your kind," the woman said bluntly, "but it's too late for you to be anywhere else. Payment in advance." Olivia counted out the coins with trembling fingers, too exhausted to feel the sting of the woman's words. The room was sparse: a narrow bed, a washstand with a cracked pitcher, and a single chair, but it was clean, and for that, Olivia was grateful. She sat heavily on the bed, rubbing her swollen ankles. The baby moved restlessly inside her, a constant reminder of Daniel and the future they'd planned together. They had been so close to marriage when the mine collapse took him, leaving her alone with their child growing in her womb and nowhere to turn but to the aunt who had written her just once in the past 5 years. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by discomfort and strange dreams. In one, Lucas Daniels stood at the edge of a vast desert, beckoning to her. In another, she was running from something she couldn't see, her belly weighing her down. She woke before dawn to shouting. Disoriented, she sat up and listened to the commotion outside. Men's voices, urgent and alarmed, filtered through the thin walls. Raiders hit the Marshall place, took everything and burned the house. Any survivors? Just the boy. He came running into town not an hour ago. Olivia's heart pounded. Raiders, perhaps the same Comanche that Lucas had warned her about. She dressed quickly, her fingers fumbling with the buttons of her dress. When she emerged from her room, the inn was in chaos. The other passengers from the stagecoach huddled near the front desk, their faces pale with fear. "The stage won't be leaving today," the driver announced, his hat in his hands. "Marshall's forming a posse to go after the raiders, says it ain't safe for civilian travel until they're dealt with." A wave of despair washed over Olivia. She couldn't afford to stay at the inn for more than a night or two. Her carefully budgeted funds would barely get her to Tucson as it was. "How long?" one of the businessmen demanded. "Can't say. Could be days." The stern woman who had chastised Olivia on the stage turned her sharp gaze on her now. "This is what happens when one travels through savage country," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Civilized people should know better." Olivia retreated to the small dining room where she sat alone at a corner table. She was finishing a meager breakfast of porridge when the inn's door burst open. The patrons fell silent as a group of dusty, armed men entered. "Marshall says we need more volunteers," announced a gray-haired man with a silver star pinned to his vest. "Raiders were heading south. We're going after them." No one moved. The businessmen studied their boots, and the other travelers found sudden interest in their meals. "Fine lot of men you are," the marshal said disgustedly. "While you sit here, families are being put to the torch." As he turned to leave, another figure appeared in the doorway. Olivia's heart leaped in recognition. "I'll ride with you, Marshal," said Lucas Daniels, stepping into the room. His eyes scanned the faces until they found Olivia's. Surprise flickered across his features. "Lucas," she exclaimed before she could stop herself. He crossed to her table in 3 long strides. "Miss Lambert, what are you doing here? You should be halfway to Tucson by now." "The stage was delayed because of the raids," she explained, aware of the eyes watching their exchange. Lucas frowned, then lowered his voice. "I rode all night to catch up to your stage. Something didn't sit right with me letting you travel this stretch alone." He glanced at the marshal, who was watching impatiently. "I need to go with them. These raiders have been hitting settlements up and down the territory." "I understand," Olivia said, though fear clutched at her heart. "Be careful." Lucas hesitated, then quickly took her hand. "When we get back, I'll make sure you get to Tucson safely. I promise." Before she could respond, he was gone, striding out with the marshal and mounting a bay horse that stood waiting outside. Olivia watched through the window as the small posse, no more than 8 men, galloped out of Somerville, dust rising behind them like a shroud. The day passed with excruciating slowness. Olivia could not afford a second night at the inn, so she sat on the small porch, watching the road and trying to ignore the pains that came and went in her lower back. By sunset, there was still no sign of the posse's return. "You'll have to pay for another night," the innkeeper told her flatly. "No exceptions." I don't have enough," Olivia admitted, the woman's lips thinned. "Then you'll have to find somewhere else to sleep." Desperation forced Olivia to her feet. "Please, I'm expecting a child. I can't sleep outside." "Not my concern," the woman replied, turning away. "Should have thought of that before you got yourself in trouble." Tears threatened again, but Olivia fought them back. She would not give this cruel woman the satisfaction. Gathering her carpetbag, she stepped out into the cooling evening air, uncertain where to go. The livery stable across the street offered the only shelter she could think of. Perhaps the stableman would allow her to sleep in the hay for the night. She had crossed half the yard when hoofbeats made her turn. A single rider approached from the south, slumped in the saddle. As he drew closer, Olivia recognized Lucas's bay horse, but the man riding it was barely conscious, his shirt dark with blood. "Help!" she cried, running toward him as he slid from the saddle. "Someone help!" Lucas Daniels collapsed into her arms, nearly taking her down with his weight. His face was ashen beneath the trail dust, and blood seeped from a wound in his side. "Ambush," he gasped. "Others, scattered, Marshall's dead." Men rushed from the inn and nearby buildings. They carried Lucas inside, laying him on a table in the dining room. The town doctor, an elderly man with trembling hands, arrived moments later. "Bullets still in there," he pronounced after cutting away Lucas's shirt. "Need to get it out before infection sets in." Olivia hovered nearby, unwilling to leave. "Is there anything I can do?" The doctor glanced at her. "You have steady hands, girl," she nodded. "Then wash up and help me. Everyone else out. I need space to work." The next hour was a blur of blood and desperate work. Olivia held instruments, wiped away blood, and pressed bandages as the doctor probed for the bullet. Lucas drifted in and out of consciousness, his eyes finding hers during lucid moments. "You're going to be fine," she told him firmly when he gasped in pain. "You have to be." When the bullet finally came free, a misshapen lump of lead that had narrowly missed his lung, the doctor sighed in relief. "He's young and strong," he told Olivia as they bandaged the wound. "With proper care, he should recover." "I'll care for him," she said without hesitation. The doctor raised an eyebrow, looking pointedly at her pregnant belly. "You sure that's wise in your condition?" "I'm sure," Olivia replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "He came back for me. I won't abandon him now." The doctor didn't argue further. "They'll put him in a room upstairs. I'll check on him in the morning." After Lucas was settled in a small room on the inn's second floor, Olivia sat beside his bed, bathing his fevered brow with cool water. The innkeeper had grudgingly allowed her to stay, though whether from newfound compassion or fear of the town's disapproval, Olivia couldn't tell. As midnight approached, Lucas stirred, his eyes opening. For a moment he seemed confused, then recognition dawned. "Olivia," he murmured, "you're still here." Of course I am, she replied softly. You came back for me, now I'm returning the favor. He tried to smile, but it turned into a grimace of pain. The others. Some returned a few hours after you, she told him. 3 men wounded, 2 missing. She hesitated. They said you fought bravely, that you covered their retreat. Lucas closed his eyes briefly. Not brave enough. Should have seen the trap. You're alive, Olivia said firmly. That's what matters now. His hand found hers, warm despite his pallor. Why are you helping me? Olivia considered the question. Why was she sitting here, exhausted and uncomfortable, caring for a man she barely knew? The answer came with surprising clarity. Because you wiped away my tears when no one else would even look at me, she said simply. You saw me as a person, not just a woman who had made a mistake. Lucas's fingers tightened around hers. Not a mistake, he said softly. A child is never a mistake. Those words, spoken with such conviction, touched something deep within Olivia. She had carried not only the physical weight of her pregnancy, but also the burden of shame for months. To hear someone, especially a man, speak without judgment felt like a blessing she hadn't known she needed. You should rest, she told him, gently disengaging her hand. You need to regain your strength. Lucas caught her wrist before she could move away. Stay, he whispered, please, just until I fall asleep. She nodded, settling back in the chair beside his bed. Within minutes, his breathing deepened as sleep claimed him. Olivia watched his face, relaxed now in slumber, and wondered at the strange turn her journey had taken. She had expected only judgment and hardship on the road to Tucson. Instead, she had found this unexpected kindness from a stranger who had risked his life to protect her. For the first time since Daniel's death, Olivia felt something stir within her besides grief and fear, a tiny spark of hope, fragile but persistent. As she finally dozed off in the uncomfortable chair, one hand resting protectively on her belly, the other still caught in Lucas's grasp, she didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but somehow it seemed less frightening than before. Morning brought the sound of more riders entering Somerville. Olivia woke with a start, her neck stiff from sleeping in the chair. Lucas was still asleep, his breathing stronger than the night before. She carefully disentangled her hand from his and moved to the window. A cavalry patrol had arrived, blue-uniformed soldiers on dust-covered horses, led by a young lieutenant with a determined expression. The town was already gathering around them, eager for news and protection. Olivia quickly checked Lucas's bandages, relieved to find no fresh bleeding, then slipped downstairs. The inn's main room was crowded with townspeople listening to the lieutenant's report. We tracked the war party to the border of the territory, the officer was saying. They've retreated to the mountains for now, but we'll maintain patrols along the stage routes. Civilian travel can resume with caution. A murmur of relief passed through the crowd. The stagecoach driver pushed his way forward. Does that mean we can leave today? I've got passengers and mail that need to get to Tucson. The lieutenant nodded. You can leave at noon. We'll provide an escort as far as Fort Buchanan. Olivia's heart sank. Noon. She glanced toward the stairs, thinking of Lucas still recovering in the room above. She couldn't leave him, not like this. But she had so little money left, and her aunt was expecting her. The baby could come early. What would she do if she were stranded in this hostile place when her time came? As the crowd dispersed, Olivia approached the stagecoach driver. Sir, I need to ask a favor, she began hesitantly. The man looked at her with impatient eyes. What is it, madam? I'm busy preparing for departure. I won't be continuing to Tucson today, she said, the decision solidifying as she spoke. Could you take a message to my aunt when you arrive? To let her know I've been delayed, the driver frowned. I'm not a messenger service. Please, Olivia pressed. I have no other way to contact her. She'll be worried if I don't arrive. Something in her expression must have moved him, for he sighed heavily. Write your note. I'll see she gets it. Thank you, Olivia said, relief washing over her. She hurried to find paper and pencil, quickly composing a brief explanation to her aunt about being delayed by raids and promising to arrive on a later stage. When she returned upstairs, the doctor was examining Lucas's wound. His weathered face brightened when he saw her. Fever's down, he reported. Clean wound, healing nicely. You did good work, Miss Lambert. Lucas was awake, propped against the pillows. His color was better, though pain still lined his face. "The cavalry's here," Olivia told them. "The stage is leaving at noon with a military escort." The doctor nodded approvingly. "Good timing. You'll be able to continue your journey safely." Lucas's eyes met hers, a question in them that he didn't voice. "I'm not going," she said firmly. "Not today." The doctor looked between them, understanding dawning on his face. "Well," he said, clearing his throat, "I'll leave you two to discuss that. Mr. Daniels needs rest and plenty of fluids. Change the bandage tonight, and I'll check again tomorrow." When the door closed behind the doctor, Lucas struggled to sit up straighter. "Olivia, you can't stay because of me. You need to get to Tucson before that baby comes." She moved to the bedside, adjusting his pillows. "I have time yet. The baby isn't due for another 2 months. But your aunt, I've sent her a message with the stage driver. She'll understand." Lucas caught her hand, his grip surprisingly strong for a man who had lost so much blood. "Why would you do this? You barely know me." Olivia met his gaze steadily. "I know enough. I know you showed me kindness when others showed contempt. I know you rode all night to protect me from danger. I know you almost died trying to keep these trails safe." She paused. "Those things tell me all I need to know about who you are, Lucas Daniels." He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his eyes. "You're something special, Olivia Lambert," he finally said softly. Daniel was a lucky man. The mention of Daniel's name sent a pang through her heart, but not the searing grief she had become accustomed to. Instead, it was a gentler ache, the memory of a love that had been real but was now past. "Yes, he was," she agreed quietly, "and I loved him, but he's gone, and I have to think about the future now." She placed a hand on her belly. "For both of us." Lucas nodded, then winced as the movement pulled at his wound. "Well, if you're staying, at least let me pay for your room. My wallet's in my saddlebag." "That's not necessary," Olivia protested. "Please," he insisted. "My pride's taken enough of a beating, what with you saving my life and all." "Let me do this small thing," she smiled, relenting. "All right, but only until you're well enough to travel. Then we'll discuss what comes next." The next few days fell into a rhythm. Olivia tended to Lucas's wound, brought him meals, and read to him from an old Bible she found in the bedside drawer. His strength returned gradually, and by the 3rd day, he was able to sit up for longer periods and even take short walks with her support. They talked for hours about their childhoods, their dreams, the circumstances that had brought them west. Lucas had lost his parents and younger brother to typhoid before the war. At 18, he joined the Confederate Army, fighting until the surrender at Appomattox. With nothing left for him in Georgia, he'd headed west, working cattle drives and in livery stables until he saved enough to start his own business in Whitewater. "I never meant to stay there so long," he admitted as they sat on the inn's porch, watching the sunset. "Always thought I'd move on, maybe to California, but days turned into months and months into years." "What kept you there?" Olivia asked. Lucas considered the question, his eyes on the distant mountains. "Familiarity, I suppose, security. After so much upheaval, it felt good to put down roots somewhere." He looked at her. "What about you? What was your life like before all this?" Olivia told him about growing up in Philadelphia, the daughter of a schoolteacher father and a mother who had once been a concert pianist. They had raised her with books and music and dreams of a cultured life. But her parents had died within months of each other when she was 19, leaving her alone and nearly penniless. "I answered an advertisement for a governess position in Denver," she explained. "That's where I met Daniel. He was the mining company's accountant." She smiled at the memory. "He courted me properly, flowers, chaperoned walks, permission from my employer. We were to be married in the spring." "What happened?" Lucas asked softly. "There was a cave-in at the main shaft. Daniel went with the rescue party. He wasn't even a miner, but they needed every man. The second collapse killed him and 5 others." Olivia's voice caught. "A week later, I realized I was expecting. My employer dismissed me immediately, said I was a bad influence on her children." Lucas's hand covered hers, warm and calloused. "That wasn't right." "No, it wasn't," Olivia agreed, "but it was reality. Unmarried and pregnant, I had few options. My aunt in Tucson was my last hope." "And now," Lucas asked, his eyes intent on her face, "what are your hopes now?" The question caught her off guard. She had been surviving day to day for so long, focused only on reaching Tucson, that she hadn't allowed herself to think beyond that destination. "I don't know," she admitted, "to give my child a safe home, to find some way to support us both." She looked down at their joined hands, to not be ashamed anymore. Lucas squeezed her fingers gently. "You have nothing to be ashamed of, Olivia, nothing at all." In that moment, with the sky painted in shades of orange and purple behind him and his eyes so earnest and kind, Olivia felt something shift inside her, a realization that had been building since that first day at Whitewater Station. This man truly saw her, and found nothing lacking, nothing shameful in who she was. The feeling frightened her with its intensity. It was too soon, too unexpected. She carefully withdrew her hand. "You should rest," she said, rising from her chair. "The doctor says you might be able to travel in a few more days if you don't overexert yourself." Lucas looked as if he wanted to say more, but nodded instead. "You're right. Tomorrow's another day." As Olivia helped him back to his room, she couldn't help wondering what that day might bring, and why the thought of parting ways with Lucas Daniels filled her with such unexpected sadness. The next morning, Olivia woke to a commotion downstairs. Voices loud and angry filtered up through the floorboards. She dressed quickly and hurried down to find Lucas already there, leaning heavily on the banister at the foot of the stairs. "What's happening?" she asked, coming to his side. His face was grim. "Raiders hit again. A homestead about 5 miles west. Family of settlers' parents killed, daughter taken." Olivia's hand flew to her mouth. "How terrible!" The town marshal, a new man hastily appointed after the previous one's death, was trying to organize another posse. "The cavalry's gone," he was saying. "Moved south yesterday. We're on our own until they circle back." "I'll ride with you," Lucas said, straightening despite the pain evident in his face. "Like hell you will," retorted the doctor, who was among the crowd. "You open that wound again, and I won't be responsible for what happens." Lucas started to argue, but Olivia laid a hand on his arm. "Please," she said quietly, "you're not strong enough yet." He looked down at her, conflict clear in his eyes. "I can't just stand by. You'd be a liability, not a help," the marshal said bluntly. "Stay here, Daniels, we'll handle it." The posse left within the hour, a dozen grim-faced men armed with rifles and determination. Olivia helped Lucas back upstairs, his face tight with frustration and pain from standing too long. "You did the right thing," she told him as she checked his bandages. "You need more time to heal." "That girl needs help now," he replied, staring at the ceiling. 13 years old, the marshal said, "just a child." Olivia had no answer for that. The horrors of frontier life had never been more apparent than in this moment. She thought of the unborn child beneath her heart and wondered what kind of world she was bringing it into. The day passed with excruciating slowness. By evening, there was still no sign of the posse's return. Lucas grew increasingly restless, pacing the small room despite Olivia's protests. When she brought his supper, she found him fully dressed, strapping on his gun belt. "What are you doing?" she demanded, setting down the tray with a clatter. "I can't wait any longer," he said, checking the chambers of his revolver. "It'll be dark soon, if they haven't found her by now." "You're in no condition to ride," Olivia protested. "You'll tear open your wound." Lucas looked at her, his expression resolute. "Some things are worth the risk." She saw then that nothing she could say would dissuade him. This was the man who had ridden through the night to protect a pregnant woman he barely knew. Of course he would risk his life to save a child in danger. "At least eat something before you go," she said, gesturing to the tray. "And let me check your bandages one last time." He nodded, sitting down to quickly consume the stew and bread she'd brought. As he ate, Olivia knelt beside him, lifting his shirt to examine the wound. The stitches were holding, the area still red but no longer inflamed. "Promise me you'll be careful," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Promise me you'll come back." Lucas's hand cupped her cheek, turning her face up to his. "I promise," he said solemnly. "I have a good reason to return now." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. For a breathless moment, Olivia thought he might kiss her. Part of her, a growing, insistent part, wanted him to, but he simply stood, tucking his shirt back in and reaching for his hat. "Stay inside, keep the doors locked," he instructed. "These are dangerous times." She walked him downstairs and to the door of the inn. The street was quiet, most of the town's men having left with the posse. Lucas's horse, recovered now from the hard ride that had brought its wounded master to town, stood saddled and waiting at the hitching post. "Lucas," Olivia said, catching his sleeve as he turned to go. Words failed her, but her eyes spoke volumes. He understood. "I know," he said softly. "Me too." Then he was gone, mounting his horse with a wince of pain and riding out of Somerville at a steady trot, his straight back gradually disappearing into the gathering dusk. Olivia returned to her room, her heart heavy with worry. She tried to distract herself with mending and reading, but her thoughts kept returning to Lucas riding alone into danger. Outside, the night deepened, and still there was no sign of the posse's return. Near midnight, exhaustion finally claimed her. She lay down fully clothed, intending only to rest her eyes, but sleep overtook her almost immediately. She dreamed of Lucas not wounded and pale, but strong and smiling, standing in a sunlit meadow with arms outstretched toward her. In the dream, she ran to him, her belly no longer swollen, a small child with golden curls toddling beside her. Just as she reached him, a gunshot shattered the peaceful scene. Olivia jerked awake, heart pounding. The gunshot had been real. It echoed in the still night air, followed by shouts and the pounding of hooves. She rushed to the window in time to see riders entering the town, torches illuminating their progress. The posse had returned. She threw a shawl around her shoulders and hurried downstairs and out onto the street, joining the townspeople emerging from their homes. The riders looked exhausted, their faces streaked with dirt and grim with fatigue. In their midst, a small figure huddled on a horse, wrapped in a blanket. "They found her," someone whispered. "Thank the Lord." Olivia scanned the riders anxiously, searching for Lucas among them. When she didn't see him, fear clutched at her heart. She pushed through the crowd toward the marshal. "Where's Lucas Daniels?" she asked, her voice tight with fear. "Did you see him?" The marshal looked down at her, surprise evident in his weary face. "Daniels, he wasn't with us, madam. He rode out to help hours ago," Olivia explained, panic rising. "He should have caught up to you." The marshal shook his head. "We never saw him. We were tracking north of the creek. Maybe he went another way." Cold dread settled in Olivia's stomach. Lucas was out there somewhere, alone and wounded, possibly lost, or she couldn't finish the thought. "We need to find him," she insisted. "He's injured. He shouldn't have been riding at all." "We're all dead on our feet, madam," the marshal said, not unkindly. "And it's pitch black out there. We wouldn't know where to start looking." Olivia knew he was right, but the thought of Lucas alone in the darkness was unbearable. "Then I'll go myself," she declared, turning toward the livery stable. The marshal caught her arm. "Now see here, madam, you can't go riding out alone in your condition. It's dangerous country and there could still be raiders about." "I don't care," she said fiercely. "He's out there because he wanted to help that child. I won't abandon him." "Olivia." The voice came from behind her, weary but unmistakable. She whirled around to see Lucas dismounting slowly from his horse at the edge of the crowd. His face was pale with exhaustion and fresh blood stained his shirt, but he was alive. "Lucas?" she cried, running to him. He staggered slightly as she reached him, and she slipped under his arm to support him. "Easy," he murmured. "I'm all right." "You're bleeding," she said, her voice catching. "You promised to be careful." A tired smile crossed his face. "I am being careful. I'm letting you help me, aren't I?" Relief made her knees weak, but she kept her arm firmly around his waist as they made their way back to the inn. Once in his room, she helped him remove his blood-stained shirt and examined the wound. One of the stitches had torn, but the damage wasn't as bad as she had feared. "What happened?" she asked as she cleaned the reopened wound. "The marshal said they never saw you." Lucas winced as she applied antiseptic. "I rode west, thinking I might pick up a trail the posse missed, found nothing but old tracks, was heading back when I heard gunshots to the north. By the time I got there, it was over." He paused. They'd already rescued the girl and were heading back. "I followed at a distance, making sure no one was trailing them." "You were protecting them," Olivia realized. "Even after all you've been through." He shrugged, then immediately regretted the movement. "Old habits. My sergeant always used to say, 'Watch your back trail, boys.' That's where death comes from." Olivia finished rebandaging his side and helped him into a clean shirt. "You need to rest now. No more heroics for a while." Lucas caught her hand as she turned to leave. "Stay," he said softly. "Please." She hesitated only briefly before sitting on the edge of the bed. Lucas's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, his touch sending warmth through her veins. "I was so afraid," she admitted quietly. "When you weren't with the posse, I thought—" "I know," he said. "I'm sorry I worried you." They sat in silence for a moment, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. "Olivia," Lucas finally said, his voice serious, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly." Her heart quickened. "All right. Do you have feelings for me?" The directness of the question took her breath away. "Because I'm falling in love with you, and I need to know if I'm a fool for hoping you might feel the same." Olivia stared at him, stunned by his candor. In the short time she'd known him, Lucas Daniels had shown her more kindness, more respect, and more understanding than she'd experienced since Daniel's death. He had wiped away her tears, defended her honor, and risked his life to protect her. And yes, somewhere along the way, her gratitude had transformed into something deeper, something that frightened her with its intensity. "It's too soon," she whispered, voicing her fear. "Daniel's only been gone a few months, and we barely know each other." Lucas nodded, accepting her words without anger. "Time doesn't always measure feeling," he said quietly. "Sometimes a moment tells you more than years could, but I understand if you're not ready." "I didn't say that," Olivia replied, surprising herself with her boldness. "I said it's too soon." "I didn't say my feelings aren't real." Hope kindled in his eyes. "And are they real?" Olivia took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "Yes," she admitted. "They are, but I'm afraid, Lucas, afraid of feeling this way again, of losing someone else I care for. Afraid of what people will say about a widow who wasn't even truly married moving on so quickly. Afraid of what it means for my child." Lucas sat up straighter, ignoring the pain it must have caused him. "Olivia Lambert, I want you to listen to me carefully," he said, his voice low and intense. "I would never ask you to forget Daniel. He was the father of your child, and he'll always be part of your life. As for what people say, let them talk. Their opinions matter less than dust to me." He took both her hands in his. "And your child. I would love that baby as my own, raise it to know that its father was a brave man who died trying to save others, and that its mother is the strongest, most beautiful woman I've ever known." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes at his words. "You can't know that," she protested weakly. "You can't know how you'll feel about another man's child." "I know my own heart," Lucas said simply. "And I know what I see when I look at you, not just a woman carrying a child, but my future, if you'll have me." The sincerity in his eyes was unmistakable. Olivia felt the last of her resistance crumbling under the weight of her growing feelings for this remarkable man. "I need time," she said finally. "Not to decide if I care for you, I do, more than I thought possible so soon after Daniel, but to be sure this is right for all of us." Lucas nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "Take all the time you need, I'm not going anywhere." He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Except maybe back to Whitewater once I'm healed. I do have a business to run, after all." The mention of Whitewater brought reality crashing back. "And I have an aunt expecting me in Tucson," Olivia remembered. "We'll figure it out," Lucas promised. One step at a time, exhaustion finally overcame them both. Olivia moved to the chair beside the bed, unwilling to leave Lucas alone after the day's events. As she drifted toward sleep, she heard him murmur, "Sweet dreams, Olivia Lambert." For the first time in months, her dreams were indeed sweet, filled not with loss and fear, but with hope and the promise of new beginnings. The next week passed in a blur of healing and decision-making. Lucas regained his strength rapidly, his determination to recover driving him to take longer walks each day with Olivia at his side. The doctor marveled at his progress. "Never seen a man heal so fast," he commented after examining the wound. "Must be the excellent nursing." Olivia blushed at the compliment, but Lucas nodded seriously. "Best care a man could ask for," he agreed, his eyes warm as they met hers. They spoke often of the future, weighing options and possibilities. Lucas's livery in Whitewater was successful, but he admitted he'd been considering expansion. "Somerville needs a good stable," he observed as they walked along the town's main street. The one they have is barely more than a lean-to, and it's a growing settlement right on the stage route. Are you thinking of moving here? Olivia asked, surprised. Lucas shrugged. It's an option. Closer to Tucson than Whitewater, if that matters to you. The implication was clear. He was considering her needs, her connection to her aunt in his plans. The gesture touched her deeply. I don't even know if my aunt still wants me to come, she admitted. I sent that message with the stage driver, but who knows if she received it or how she responded. We could find out, Lucas suggested. The stage comes through tomorrow. We could ask the driver if he has any reply. Olivia nodded, but anxiety gnawed at her. What if her aunt had withdrawn her offer of help? What would she do then, with her funds nearly depleted and her time growing short? As if reading her thoughts, Lucas took her hand. Whatever happens, you're not alone anymore, Olivia, I promise you that. His words comforted her, but still she worried. Their feelings for each other were new, untested by time or hardship. Was it fair to bind him to her and her unborn child based on such a brief acquaintance? The next day, they waited together at the stage stop. When the coach arrived in a cloud of dust, Olivia scanned the driver's face anxiously as he climbed down from his perch. Miss Lambert, he called, looking around. When he spotted her, he nodded in recognition. Got a letter for you from Tucson. Olivia's hands trembled as she accepted the sealed envelope. The handwriting was spidery and unfamiliar, her aunt's, she presumed, though they had corresponded so rarely that she couldn't be certain. Would you like privacy? Lucas asked softly. She shook her head. No. Whatever it says, I want you with me. They moved to a bench outside the general store, and Olivia carefully broke the seal. The letter was brief but clear. Dear Olivia, I received your message about the delay. While I sympathize with your situation, I must inform you that my circumstances have changed. My boarding house has been sold, and I am moving to San Francisco to live with my son. I regret that I can no longer offer you a place to stay. Perhaps the church in Tucson can provide assistance for a woman in your condition. With regrets, Aunt Margaret, Olivia stared at the words, her last hope crumbling before her eyes. Lucas read over her shoulder, his face darkening with each line. She can't just abandon you like this, he said, anger evident in his voice. You're her family. She barely knows me, Olivia replied numbly. We've met only twice when I was a child. I was foolish to pin all my hopes on her. Lucas took the letter from her unresisting fingers and folded it carefully. This changes nothing, he said firmly, except perhaps our timeline. Olivia looked at him questioningly. I was going to wait, he explained, give you more time to be sure of your feelings. But circumstances being what they are, he took a deep breath. Olivia Lambert, will you marry me? The directness of the proposal left her speechless. Around them, the busy street continued its normal activity, horses and wagons passing, people going about their business, but for Olivia, time seemed to stop. Lucas, she finally managed, you don't have to do this, not out of pity or obligation. His expression grew serious. This has nothing to do with pity. I love you, Olivia. I think I started falling for you the moment you took my bandana at Whitewater Station. I want to build a life with you and your child. He paused. But if you don't feel the same, if you need more time, I understand. Olivia studied his face, the earnest eyes, the strong jaw, the mouth that had spoken such kind words to her when she needed them most. She thought of Daniel, of the love they had shared and the dreams that had died with him. Would he want her to seize this second chance at happiness? She believed he would. Yes, she said softly, then more firmly, yes, I will marry you, Lucas Daniels. Joy transformed his face. He leaned forward and for the first time pressed his lips to hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. Olivia responded with a certainty that surprised her, her hand coming up to rest against his cheek. When they parted, both slightly breathless, Lucas grinned. Well, that settles it then. Settles what? Olivia asked, her heart still racing from the kiss. Where we're going, he replied. Whitewater. It's my home and I want it to be yours too. The house behind the livery isn't much, but it's solid and warm. We can expand it before the baby comes. The prospect of a real home, not her aunt's charity or a rented room, but a place that belonged to them, filled Olivia with unexpected joy. When? She asked simply. Lucas considered. I'm well enough to travel now. We could leave on tomorrow's stage, be in Whitewater by the end of the week. Get married as soon as we arrive. It was happening so fast, too fast, perhaps, by the standards of polite society, but they weren't in Philadelphia drawing rooms or Denver parlors. This was the frontier, where life moved at its own pace and practicality often trumped convention. Tomorrow, then, Olivia agreed, a smile spreading across her face. I don't have much to pack. Lucas laughed, the sound warm and full of promise. Neither do I, just a future to build with you. They spent the afternoon making preparations, settling accounts at the inn, purchasing supplies for the journey, and, in Lucas's case, arranging for a telegram to be sent ahead to Whitewater announcing their imminent arrival and marriage plans. As evening fell, they sat together on the inn's porch, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. Olivia leaned against Lucas's shoulder, his arm around her waist, her hand resting on her rounded belly where the baby kicked vigorously. Feel, she said, guiding his hand to the spot. He's very active today. Lucas's face softened with wonder as he felt the movement beneath his palm. You think it's a boy, Olivia nodded. I do, though I'd be equally happy with a daughter. Either way, that child is going to know love, Lucas promised. And so will you every day for the rest of our lives. She believed him. Despite the whirlwind nature of their relationship, despite the obstacles they had yet to face, Olivia trusted in the future they would build together. A future that had seemed impossible just weeks ago when she sat crying in a stagecoach, shamed by strangers for her tears and her condition. I never thanked you properly, she said suddenly, turning to face him. For what? Lucas asked, puzzled. For that day at Whitewater Station. For wiping away my tears and telling me to cry with you. She smiled at the memory. You have no idea what that meant to me, to be seen, to be allowed to feel my grief without shame. Lucas's eyes grew serious. I couldn't bear to see you hurting like that, being judged by people who knew nothing about you or your story. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. I think I fell in love with your courage that day, the way you held yourself with dignity despite everything. I didn't feel very courageous, Olivia admitted. I felt lost and alone. But you weren't, Lucas said softly. Not really, even then I think our paths were meant to cross. Olivia wasn't sure if she believed in fate or divine intervention, but there was something undeniably right about finding Lucas when she had needed him most, as if the universe had known what she required before she did. Tomorrow, she said, we start our new life together. Lucas sealed the promise with a kiss, tender and full of hope. Above them, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, witnesses to a love that had blossomed against all odds in the harsh beauty of the Wild West. The stagecoach journey to Whitewater was long but uneventful. The cavalry patrols had driven the raiders deeper into the mountains, making the trails safer for travelers. Still, Lucas remained vigilant, his hand never far from his revolver as they crossed the open country. Olivia spent much of the journey gazing out the window, marveling at how different this trip felt from her tearful travel just weeks earlier. Now, instead of fear and uncertainty, she felt anticipation and hope. Lucas sat beside her, his solid presence a constant reminder that she was no longer alone. They arrived in Whitewater late on the third day, the coach rolling to a stop in front of the livery stable that Lucas had built with his own hands. A small crowd had gathered, word of their arrival and impending marriage having spread throughout the settlement. Word travels fast, Olivia observed nervously as Lucas helped her down from the coach. Small towns, he replied with a wry smile. No secrets here. A burly man with a thick gray beard stepped forward, hand extended. About time you got back, Daniels. Stable's been running itself poorly, I might add. Lucas laughed, clasping the man's hand. Hank, this is Miss Olivia Lambert, soon to be Mrs. Daniels. Olivia, this is Hank Morgan, my right-hand man and the best blacksmith this side of the Mississippi. Hank doffed his hat politely. Madam, it's a pleasure. We've heard quite a bit about you from Lucas's telegram. Olivia smiled, surprised by the warm welcome. It's lovely to meet you, Mr. Morgan. More introductions followed: the general store owner and his wife, the doctor, the telegraph operator, and a dozen other residents of Whitewater. Each greeted Olivia with genuine warmth, their curiosity about her evident but not unkind. "They seem nice," she whispered to Lucas as they finally escaped the impromptu welcoming committee and walked toward the house behind the livery. "They are," he assured her. "Good people, most of them. They'll look out for you for us." The house was small but solidly built, with 2 rooms downstairs and a loft above. Lucas had clearly prepared for her arrival. The floors were swept, fresh curtains hung at the windows, and a vase of wildflowers sat on the kitchen table. "Hank's wife must have done this," he said, looking around with approval. "I didn't leave it nearly this tidy." Olivia moved through the rooms, trying to imagine making this place her home. It was humble compared to the house she'd grown up in, but it had a warmth and charm that appealed to her. "What do you think?" Lucas asked, watching her with a hint of anxiety. "I know it's not much." "It's perfect," she said honestly. "It just needs a woman's touch." Relief spread across his face. "You'll have free rein to make any changes you want. I'm not particular about such things." That night, Lucas insisted on sleeping in the stable to preserve Olivia's reputation until they were properly married. She protested. After all, she was already with child, her reputation beyond saving in many people's eyes, but he was adamant. "We're starting fresh here," he said firmly. "I want to do right by you in every way." The next morning, Olivia woke to the sound of hammering. She dressed quickly and ventured outside to find Lucas and several other men working on an addition to the back of the house. "What's this?" she asked in surprise. Lucas set down his hammer and came to greet her. "A nursery," he explained. "I thought we should get started right away. The baby will be here before we know it." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes, happy tears this time. This man, who had no obligation to her or her unborn child, was building a room specifically for the baby. The gesture spoke volumes about the kind of husband and father he would be. The town's reverend, a kind-faced man named Thomas Wilkins, agreed to perform the ceremony that afternoon. Word spread quickly, and by midday, it seemed all of Whitewater was preparing for the wedding. Women arrived at the house bearing food and offers of help. One brought a dress pale blue, simply cut but beautiful, that her daughter had worn for her own wedding. "It might need taking out a bit," the woman said tactfully, glancing at Olivia's rounded belly. "I'm handy with a needle if you'd like help." Olivia accepted the loan gratefully, touched by the generosity of these strangers who were welcoming her so readily into their community. By 4 o'clock, the dress had been altered, Olivia's hair arranged with wildflowers, and the house transformed with ribbons and more flowers gathered from the surrounding countryside. The entire settlement gathered in front of the livery stable, where Reverend Wilkins waited with Lucas, who had donned a clean shirt and his best vest for the occasion. As Olivia walked toward them, a hush fell over the crowd. Lucas's face, when he saw her, filled with such joy and pride that any lingering doubts she might have harbored melted away. This was right. This was where she was meant to be. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. They exchanged vows beneath the clear blue sky, promising to love and cherish each other for all their days. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas kissed her with a tenderness that brought fresh tears to her eyes, tears of happiness that no one would shame her for. The celebration afterward lasted well into the evening. Tables were set up in the livery yard, laden with food contributed by everyone in the settlement. There was music, a fiddle and harmonica playing lively tunes and dancing, though Olivia's condition limited her participation to a single slow dance in her new husband's arms. "Are you happy?" Lucas murmured as they swayed together under the stars. "More than I ever thought possible again," she replied truthfully. "And you," his arms tightened around her. "I have everything I never knew I wanted right here in my arms." Later, when the last guests had departed and they were finally alone in their home, Lucas led Olivia to the bedroom that was now theirs to share. He had prepared this room 2 new linens on the bed, a lamp burning low on the bedside table, a small bouquet of flowers on the dresser. "Welcome home, Mrs. Daniels," he said softly. Olivia smiled at the new name, her third in as many years, from Lambert to almost Reynolds and now to Daniels. But this one, she felt certain, would be hers for the rest of her days. Their first night as husband and wife was tender and unhurried, Lucas treating her with a gentleness that acknowledged both her condition and the newness of their physical relationship. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, Olivia felt a sense of peace she had thought lost forever after Daniel's death. "I used to think my life was over," she confessed in the darkness, "that I would never feel joy again, never love again." Lucas's hand stroked her hair. "And now I know that life goes on, that hearts can heal and love again without betraying what came before." She placed his hand on her belly, where the baby slept quietly. "This child will know about Daniel, about the brave man who gave him life. But he'll also know about you, Lucas, the man who chose to love us both when you had no obligation to do so." "I didn't choose to love you," Lucas said softly. "Love chose me. From the moment I saw you crying in that stagecoach, I was yours, whether I knew it then or not." In the weeks that followed, they settled into a rhythm of married life. Lucas worked at the livery, occasionally assisted by Olivia when her condition permitted. The nursery took shape, a small but cheerful room with a cradle Lucas crafted himself from pine, a rocking chair purchased from the general store, and curtains Olivia sewed from fabric, sent all the way from Santa Fe. The women of Whitewater embraced Olivia as one of their own, sharing advice about childbirth and infant care, bringing gifts for the baby, and including her in their quilting circles and social gatherings. No one mentioned her condition or questioned the timing of her marriage. In this frontier community, life was too precious and too precarious to waste energy on judgment or gossip. As her time grew near, Olivia found herself increasingly grateful for the decision to marry Lucas and make Whitewater their home. What had begun as a desperate situation had transformed into a life filled with purpose and love. Her only regret was that her parents couldn't see her happiness, couldn't know the good man she had married or the community that had welcomed her. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Olivia shared this thought with Lucas. "I wish they could have known you," she said wistfully. "My father would have appreciated your honesty and my mother would have loved your kindness." Lucas squeezed her hand. "I wish I could have known them too, but they live on in you, Olivia, in your strength, your intelligence, your gentle heart, and they'll live on in our child too." "Our child," she repeated, savoring the words. Though the baby was not Lucas's by blood, he had never once referred to it as anything but ours since the day they were married. 2 weeks later, as the first autumn chill touched the air, Olivia went into labor. It began at dawn, a dull ache in her lower back that gradually intensified into unmistakable contractions. Lucas sent Hank's son riding for the midwife, who arrived within the hour, her bag of supplies in hand. "First babies take their time," she assured Lucas as she shooed him from the bedroom. "Go tend to your horses. I'll call when there's news." Banished from his wife's side, Lucas paced the livery yard, unable to concentrate on work, wincing with each cry that reached his ears from the house. Hank and the other men tried to distract him with conversation and work, but his mind remained fixed on Olivia and the child struggling to enter the world. As afternoon turned to evening, her cries grew more frequent and more intense. Lucas couldn't bear it any longer. Despite the midwife's instructions, he returned to the house and stood outside the bedroom door, his heart pounding with fear and anticipation. "Lucas," Olivia's voice called from within, weak but determined. "Lucas, I need you." The midwife opened the door, her expression disapproving but resigned. "She's asking for you. You can come in, but stay at the head of the bed and do exactly as I say." Lucas nodded, too concerned about Olivia to argue with the conditions. He entered the room to find his wife pale and exhausted, her hair damp with sweat, her eyes bright with pain and determination. "I'm here," he said, taking her hand and brushing the hair from her forehead. "I'm right here with you." Olivia gripped his hand with surprising strength as another contraction seized her. "Don't leave," she gasped when it passed. "Never," he promised, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "You're the strongest woman I know, Olivia Daniels. You can do this." For the next 2 hours, Lucas remained at her side, supporting her through each contraction, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement when her strength flagged. As the night deepened around them, Olivia's labor intensified until, with a final tremendous effort, she brought their child into the world. A boy, the midwife announced triumphantly, holding up the squalling infant. A fine, healthy boy. Lucas stared in wonder at the tiny, red-faced creature that the midwife quickly cleaned and wrapped in a soft blanket. When she placed the baby in Olivia's arms, he felt a surge of emotion so powerful it nearly brought him to his knees. "He's perfect," Olivia whispered, tears streaming down her face as she counted fingers and toes. "Lucas, look at him. Isn't he beautiful?" Lucas couldn't speak past the lump in his throat. He nodded, gently touching the downy head with one finger. This child, born of another man's seed but entrusted to his care, had already claimed his heart completely. "What will you call him?" the midwife asked as she busied herself with the afterbirth. Olivia looked up at Lucas, a question in her eyes. They had discussed names but made no final decision, unsure whether the baby would be a boy or girl. "Daniel," Lucas said softly. "Daniel Lucas Daniels." Fresh tears filled Olivia's eyes at his choice, honoring her first love while also claiming the child as his own. "It's perfect," she agreed. "Welcome to the world, Daniel Lucas." Later, when the midwife had gone and Olivia was sleeping, Lucas sat in the rocking chair by the bedroom window, his newborn son cradled against his chest. The baby's tiny hand had wrapped around his finger with surprising strength, as if anchoring himself to his new father. "I'll always protect you," Lucas whispered to the sleeping infant. "You and your mother both. I'll teach you to ride and rope and be a good man like your father before me was. And I'll make sure you know how much you were wanted and loved from the very beginning." As dawn broke over Whitewater, painting the sky with streaks of pink and gold, Lucas Daniels rocked his son and watched his wife sleep, overwhelmed with gratitude for the twists of fate that had brought them together. What had begun with tears in a dusty stagecoach had blossomed into a love stronger and more enduring than he could have imagined. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that this was only the beginning of their story. 5 years later, Olivia stood on the porch of their expanded home, watching as Lucas taught young Daniel to guide a gentle pony around the corral. The boy, with his mother's auburn hair and his biological father's blue eyes, sat tall in the saddle, his face serious with concentration as he followed Lucas's instructions. "That's it, Danny," Lucas called encouragingly. "You're a natural horseman, just like I knew you'd be." Daniel's face broke into a proud grin at the praise. "Can I go faster, Pa?" "Not today, son. One step at a time, remember?" Olivia smiled, her hand resting on her swollen belly where their second child, a daughter, she was certain would arrive before winter. The years had been kind to them. Lucas's livery had prospered, expanding to include a freight business that served settlements throughout the territory. Whitewater had grown too, from a simple stagecoach stop to a thriving town with a school, a church, and even a small newspaper. Through it all, their love had deepened and strengthened, tested by the challenges of frontier life but never broken. Lucas had been true to his word, loving Daniel as his own son, sharing stories of the brave man who had given him life while building his own bond with the boy who called him Pa without reservation or doubt. As she watched them together, Olivia thought back to that day when she had sat crying in a stagecoach, shamed for her tears and her condition. How far she had come since then from a woman alone and desperate to a wife, mother, and respected member of her community. All because one kind man had seen her pain and instead of turning away had wiped her tears and said simply, "Cry with me." "Mama," Daniel called, waving excitedly. "Look at me, I'm riding all by myself." Lucas had stepped back, allowing the boy to guide the pony independently for the first time. Pride shone in his eyes as he watched his son. For Daniel was his son in every way that mattered. Take this small step toward independence. "I see you, sweetheart," Olivia called back. "You're doing wonderfully." Later, as the sun set and they sat together on the porch, Daniel asleep inside after his exciting day, Lucas placed his hand over Olivia's on her belly. "He's going to be a good big brother," he observed as the baby kicked beneath their joined hands. Olivia corrected with a smile. "And yes, he will be." Lucas chuckled at their ongoing friendly disagreement about the baby's gender. Boy or girl, this child is lucky to be born into so much love. Olivia leaned her head against his shoulder, contentment washing over her. We're all lucky, Lucas. More than I ever dreamed possible when I was at my lowest point. He pressed a kiss to her temple. That day in the stagecoach, do you ever think about it? Often, she admitted. It was the turning point of my life, though I didn't know it then. Lucas was quiet for a moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. I never told you why I approached you that day, he finally said. Why, out of all the passengers who came through Whitewater station, I noticed you. Olivia looked up at him curiously. I assumed it was because I was crying. Partly, he acknowledged, but there was more to it. He took a deep breath. The night before, I'd had a dream about my mother. She died when I was 12, but in the dream, she was as real as you are now. She told me to watch for a woman with tears who needed kindness, that helping her would change my life. Olivia stared at him, astonished. You never mentioned this before. Lucas shrugged slightly. It sounded foolish following a dream. And after we met, it didn't seem important how we found each other, only that we did. And now, she prompted gently, now I wonder if there wasn't something more at work than chance, if perhaps those we've loved and lost don't continue to watch over us in ways we can't understand. He smiled down at her. Or maybe I just needed that dream to give me the courage to approach a beautiful woman in distress. Olivia reached up to touch his face, her heart full of love for this man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved. However it happened, I'm grateful, she said softly. For the dream, for your courage, for everything that brought us together. Lucas turned his face to kiss her palm. As am I, my love, as am I. Inside the house, Daniel called out in his sleep. Olivia started to rise, but Lucas gently pressed her back into her seat. I'll go, he said, standing and stretching. You rest. She watched him disappear into the house, marveling at how completely he had embraced fatherhood not as a duty or obligation, but as a joy and privilege. In all the years since their marriage, he had never once treated Daniel as anything less than his own flesh and blood. The baby shifted inside her, a gentle reminder of the new life they had created together. This child would be Lucas's by blood, but Olivia knew it would make no difference in his love. His heart was big enough for both children, for all of them. As stars appeared in the darkening sky above Whitewater, Olivia Daniels closed her eyes and offered a silent prayer of gratitude for second chances, for unexpected joy, and for the healing power of love. Her journey had brought her through grief and shame to a place of peace, and belonging a life richer and fuller than she could have imagined on that tearful day when a kind cowboy had seen her pain and chosen to share it. And in that sharing, they had found the greatest blessing of all, a love strong enough to build a future on, one day at a time.